The one thing that you want to do in the NFL this time of year is stay out of the news. So, of course, we're talking about the Cleveland Browns on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, The Legacy, Louis DiBiase. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about some summer mistakes. Did the Chicago Bears make one with a recent extension with their general manager? The Los Angeles Chargers top running back Najee Harris made the classic summer mistake. And we'll start with the Cleveland Browns, who just appear to be cursed and have once again another incident on their name. Before we dive into it, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day, and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So over the weekend, Louis, we got some legal issues with Cleveland Browns second-round rookie Quinshon Judkins, the running back out of Ohio State. He was arrested on domestic violence and battery charges in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on Saturday, according to a report from Fort Lauderdale Police Department and Broward County arrest records. Obviously, it's an ongoing legal situation. You don't want to speak out of turn, but nonetheless, I think the real conversation here is this time of year, this is never what you want to hear if you're an NFL team. This is the one thing that you absolutely can't afford at this time of year. And my guy Spencer from Locked On Browns talked about his feelings on the matter.
Well, per usual, never a dull moment when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, even during the summer when I was thinking, hey, it's going to be smooth sailing to training camp. We're nearly there. The biggest scandal we had to talk about was a couple Shedeur Sanders speeding tickets. Ooh. And instead, we get Quinshon Judkins arrested in Florida on a strike, battery, and domestic violence charge. We know how the Browns generally handle these things through a spokesperson with the team. They've said they're gathering information. That's generally what their blanket statement they give. They let the legal process play out. They never jump the gun on this stuff. What's interesting is Quinshon is the only rookie unsigned at this point. So I don't know how that factors into any of this. But it's just another off season where the Browns can't stay out of the negative headlines when it comes to players getting in trouble this time of year. And for a guy who's supposed to be a feature back for you, a key contributor for you, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out leading up to training camp, leading up to the season, and so on and so forth. And it's wild because Quinshon has no, pre-existing history of getting in any legal trouble. So this is all sort of new and sort of shocking. I was certainly caught off guard by it. Everything about Quinshon, the pre-draft process, was that he's a great guy, resoundingly adored by everybody who talked about him or knows him. And so it's stunning that it happens, but here we are, and just seems to always be something with this team, even this time of year.
And I think that's the big point there. It's always something with the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, no, it honestly is. And that's the thing. Obviously, what happened with Judkins off the field goes without saying, right? But on the field, it's just another player the Browns were really banking on having a big role this year. And who knows what still happens, but he is unsigned. He now has this charge. And the Cleveland Browns, like the last couple of years, I'm like, okay, maybe they're starting to become a normal NFL, a well-run organization. They have a good head coach that's won Coach of the Year that's been able to elevate some poor quarterback situations. And I think Andrew Berry's made a lot of moves that I really like. And then something like this happens, something like the Deshaun Watson signing happens, something like the weird draft they had happens with Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, where their owner gets involved. And it's like, it's almost like the football gods want the Cleveland Browns to stay the Cleveland Browns, even though they're starting to figure things out. Stuff like this and again, this is a completely different kind of situation, but it just feels like something always happens to the Browns to derail them from becoming a competent franchise in the NFL. And Judkins, I thought, was going to have a big role this year, and we'll see what happens, but that's a big blow to the Browns if he's not available.
Yeah, and, on the singular issue of Quinshon Judkins, obviously you wait for the information here, but if anything has turned out to be true, it's awful, of course. But more importantly, the big, or not more importantly, I guess, but the larger conversation is really the focus here with the Browns in general. And you're right, he was supposed to be a big part of that offense with Nick Chubb moving on. Now they have Jerome Ford, they have Dylan Sampson in there. That combination, if Judkins were unavailable, would be one of the worst running back situations in the NFL. And the rest of the roster has deteriorated from what the playoff roster looked like a couple of years ago on the offensive line, on the defensive side of the ball. So I think the Browns are one of these teams that is just absolutely primed to have a bad season, especially in a competitive division where the Bengals may win some more games. And I think the Steelers have improved. I know that's debates that we've had on this show quite a bit, but at the end of the day, I do think it's just one of those things where the Browns, you say that, the football gods want to keep the Browns. It's almost like, to me, the football gods want the Browns to be normal, and the Browns want to keep the Browns the Browns. With all of these outlandish, strange decisions, if they just made the normal moves, they could probably get on track to be normal, but they keep setting themselves back. Yeah. And I think the Judkins situation is just more symptomatic of the Browns' overall curse. I guess that's really what I named the show, like the Cleveland curse. It just seems like they can't get out of their own way, and I certainly don't think they're going to figure things out this year.
No, I think they were already set up to be and why they needed Judkins so badly this year is because their quarterback situation was going to be a mess, and it's why we all thought even before this they were going to be one of the worst teams in football. And if they don't have Judkins, and again, like you said, we'll see what actually happens with this. It's hard to really discuss that part of it, but
and the NFL drags their feet with legal stuff. Exactly. So you could do something today and then be suspended in 2027.
Rashi might not get suspended for 3 years until after what happened with his situation a couple years ago. So, but I think the Browns for the future, I think they know this year was kind of going to be a throwaway, and it's part of why they made that trade with Travis, with the Jaguars to get Travis Hunter, and they're probably going to be in line to have a top pick in the 2026 NFL draft, and if they don't have Judkins, that makes their offense even worse.
Absolutely. For a team that's probably going to have to rely on the run, whether it's a rookie quarterback or it's a bad veteran, an old veteran, whoever they go with out of the four options, they're going to need a pretty strong running game to be successful. But one thing you mentioned earlier about Judkins is he is unsigned right now. And I wanted to take a moment as we get closer to training camp. The Chargers are kicking off training camp this week ahead of most NFL teams. We'll talk about them in a moment. But if you're an NFL fan and your team has not signed your second round pick, you're in line with a lot of other fan bases as well. Right now, there are 30 of 32 second round picks that remain unsigned. It's kind of a strange situation heading into training camp. The first two second round picks this year signed 100% fully guaranteed deals. Well, the next player in line is Nick Amanwari, the safety from the Seattle Seahawks, who they traded up with the Tennessee Titans and drafted him. He wants a fully guaranteed deal now, too, and the Seahawks have yet to do that. And that has created kind of a domino effect where all the players behind Nick Amanwari are now looking at him and saying, well, if you get the fully guaranteed, then I can ask for it. And it's a domino effect. So right now, 30 of 32 second-round picks in the NFL have gone unsigned. And if you're wondering why your team's second-round pick isn't signed, it's because it is a legal battle right now between the NFL and their players. And when you add in some of the legal things that have come to light in recent weeks and days around the NFL and, the Players Association and all of that different stuff, it's a very strange time in the financial side of the NFL business right now between these two. And this second round pick thing that includes Judkins, which how can he go back and look for guaranteed money now and ask for that after this, no matter when the punishment or if it does or whatever. Tough to argue for fully guaranteed after something like this a week ago. But this second round pick situation is a symptom of the larger thing brewing behind the scenes with the NFL.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the opposite of what's going on with Shamar Stewart and the Cincinnati Bengals, where it's like the team-player draft dynamic right now contractually is interesting. Both sides are kind of trying new things out, right? Players want fully guaranteed deals on day 2. The Bengals were trying out something new that Shamar Stewart didn't want to go for with the contract stipulation. So this is a whole another show we could do, but it'll be interesting to see if this kind of stuff continues in the future, especially with college football players getting paid more and more. Are guys that go into day 2 or day 3 of the draft going to want these fully guaranteed deals to enter the draft? Like there's a whole new kind of, wormhole we could get into with that in the future, but it is interesting to see the teams and the prospects trying to like start something new than we're used to, and that's interesting to watch.
At the end of the day, I think the NIL revolution in college football has changed the mindset of players and agents to a point where they are wanting to get more on their plate than what they've been given before. And the battle will rage on. We aren't financial gurus here on the show. We talk football. But with that in mind, let's talk about some football. But, of course, a story about football is going to include some more summer mistakes. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. We've all been there. You're logging on early. You're waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for the show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. You can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. I buy all my tickets on Gametime. NFL, college football, WNBA, NBA, MLB. I've gone to concerts. I've gone to shows with tickets on Gametime. Why? They have the best features, a panoramic view from your seat before you buy, the lowest price guarantee. You can get all-in pricing. It's just absolutely fantastic. So you take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Louis, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. Again, we're talking about some summer mistakes right before football kicks off. We talked about the curse in Cleveland and Quinshon Judkins situation and the second-round pick situation and the NFL financial situation. It's all so much to take in. But don't worry, folks. The Chargers are kicking off training camp this week. Football is coming back into our lives. But again, not without some summer mistakes. Running back Najee Harris came from the Pittsburgh Steelers as a free agent to the Los Angeles Chargers. I thought it was a really savvy move by the Chargers, who want a big, powerful, physical run game. But Quinshon Judkins did the classic summertime mistake and had a fireworks incident. Our guys from Locked On Chargers broke it down.
David, this was a buy or sell. This was an overreaction. This is something we both sold on Wednesday's show and something maybe we should have bought a little bit more. Obviously, I thought it was weird, and we kind of laid out what the facts of it were on Wednesday as far as there being a firework accident in Najee Harris's hometown, but no actual real reporting on it. Well, the real reporting came out in droves on Thursday, and this is a statement that was let out by Doug Hendrickson before any of the big news scoopers could actually get anything out. He said Najee Harris was present at a 4th of July event where a fireworks mishap resulted in injuries to several attendees. Najee sustained a superficial eye injury during the incident, but is fully expected to be ready for the upcoming NFL season. Let's start with this, the obvious. Dumb. Just so dumb. Like, it's crazy to me that players still find themselves in these situations where you have illegal fireworks, according to reports, industrial strength fireworks, according to reports, in an area that you're not actually legally allowed to set them off, and something bad happens. You do things, you add up all three of those things, yeah, something bad is going to happen. Now, good news that he's expected to play this season, David, obviously, but like you see this and you're like, man, like so dumb, like stupid that this happened, but also like feels like a big bullet or firework was dodged in this case.
Love the joke there at the end from my guy Dan from Locked On Chargers, but I do think this is a big deal for the Chargers. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say that Najee Harris is one of the best running backs in the NFL or anything like that, but I think he's a very solid running back. I thought he was a little underrated in Pittsburgh because their offense was just always clunky and kind of gross to watch. But I think Najee Harris combined with their rookie Omari and Hampton, they finally have the talent in the backfield that aligns with their philosophy. We know Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh, they want to run the football. They want to have a physical, strong attack with pullers and fullbacks coming downhill at you. Like, they want to blow you off the ball with strength. And they finally have two running. Gus Edwards is like the I don't want to say Dollar General because it's not quite that bad, but he's just a mid-tier version, in my opinion, of a guy like Najee Harris.
Yeah.
So you get a better, younger, more athletic version of what you had in Gus Edwards. I think J.K. Dobbins was solid, but I think Omari and Hampton could be better right now than J.K. Dobbins is. I think the Chargers would tell you that as well, or they wouldn't have taken him in the first round. So I think that dual-headed running attack for what they want to be, the physical team they want to be, is important. So I think Najee Harris avoiding a major injury here and just cosmetic or whatever that means. I think it's a great thing that he didn't suffer something serious. And NFL players just don't, I'm not telling you to not go watch fireworks. Just don't be the guy lighting off the fireworks. Just don't be right around the people lighting them off. Just stand back. They go up in the air. They blow up. You could see them from far away. Just don't be so close. Just don't be so close.
Do we not learn from Jason Pierre-Paul?
No, we never do.
I guess not. But yeah, you're right. I mean, avoiding any major injury for Harris is big for the Chargers because they are trying to build this ground and pound, old school 49ers style of team, or even kind of like what the Detroit Lions built with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, although Marion Hampton is going to be the future of that backfield, and I think eventually he will take over as like he has the ability to be an every down back. Like he was one of my favorite prospects in this past draft, but they are going to use Najee Harris. Like I think he does have a David Montgomery type of role in this offense this year, especially with Hampton starting off as a rookie. Harris, especially the first half of the year, will probably be the featured back in a way in a committee type of approach.
I think so.
Yeah, they've drafted a lot of tackles early the last couple of years. Like they're building this to be a run first offense, even with Justin Herbert under center. So Harris avoiding any sort of injury is big because I think he will have a bigger role even than Gus Edwards had last year.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I can already hear the fantasy community complaining about Hampton and Harris, and you just never know which one to play.
I'm dodging it this year.
If one
I'm
goes
a Hampton
down
guy in 2026. I'm not touching that this year.
You got to be careful. But it does make you wonder, like Detroit, if their offensive line, Justin Herbert as a threat, is that enough to maybe sustain both of those guys, moving away from the fantasy perspective, which obviously is somewhat connected to the success of the team. If they're both successful for fantasy, that probably means that the offense is doing pretty well. Right. But I think that there's a chance that they will be. And I think you may get a little bit of value from a fantasy perspective, which we'll check with, Michelle, the data queen, later in the week on maybe what she thinks about that, of course, with her fantasy expertise. But just saying, I think that both those running backs being relevant in fantasy as usable backs could be a symptom of the offense of the Chargers playing very, very well and being very successful. They're winning games. They're up. They're running the football more. That's already what they want to do. And as I said last week, Louis, one of my big takes coming into this season is that the Chargers are going to win the AFC West. How crazy do you think I am, and what's your view on the Chargers heading into the year?
I don't think it's crazy. I think they're a good team. I like the way they're setting things up with Harbaugh. That offensive line is looking really good. I really like that backfield. I think there is enough touches to go around for both of them to make an impact. The defense has a lot of pieces. To win the division, though, that means you have to go from good to great, right? You have to beat out Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and that is going to need more from Justin Herbert. Like, he's going to have to be great. And I personally, as much as I like Justin Herbert, I think he's one of the more overrated players at this position. And if he's supposed to be that top 5, top 7 guy that everybody has just kind of granted him that label for years now, right? I don't really know if he's earned it. He's got to go from good to great to win the division. And especially when games matter the most. And I know he hasn't had the best support system over the years, but I don't think he's played his best football like at the end of years and in the couple playoff games he's been in. So I don't think you're crazy, but I want to see like another leap from Justin Herbert this year. Not everybody agrees with me in that kind of perspective, but it's still, even with their run-first approach, it's still about Herbert for me when we get to like December and January.
Yeah, he's got to elevate them. And look, you look at that wide receiver group. I do like Ladd McConkey. Obviously, he took a major step forward. Quinton Johnston is still just an okay player, right on the line of, is he even a starting level player? Bringing Mike Williams back, what's that really going to be?
Trey Harris in the second round, though, like that's a solid investment.
And the thing about Trey Harris to me, though, going just full draft analysis, coming out of Ole Miss's system, I don't know that Trey Harris is ready to contribute in a Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman offense right away. Like, he's a big physical guy. I think he's going to be willing to block, and that'll get him on the field early if he really, wants to block and all that. But is that group of guys really good enough. That is the one question that I have, but really I think that the Chiefs could take a small step back, and that's kind of the engine of my take.
Sure. But, and again, Tyler, if people feel that Justin Herbert is this top 5 caliber quarterback that he's been labeled, that's not the worst pass catching core in the NFL. It should be good enough for a top 5 player to win at least one playoff game, and he hasn't done that yet. So I don't think you're crazy. I like what the Chargers are building, but it's really all about Justin Herbert for me, and I need to see that next step this year to totally buy in.
And Louis, I've been making a little bit of a list, and we've talked about it here and there, of quarterbacks who I think are in a good enough situation to be judged this year. We've talked about I think Bryce Young and Michael Penix is a guy, and we can, talk about a full list of them eventually as we get closer to the season. But I am going to add Justin Herbert to that list. He has enough around him this year where we should see his absolute best and know truly where he should be ranked in those quarterback conversations. Because you're right, whether he's 5, 7, top 10, he gets a lot of credit for this stuff. And we haven't really seen as many accomplishments as most guys who get that sort of credit. So this year, it is Justin Herbert's time to show what he's truly capable of and who he can be. But with that being said, someone who got an extension without really showing what they're truly capable of, in my opinion, is Ryan Poles, the general manager of the Chicago Bears. And that could turn out to be a summer mistake as well. All right, Louis, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL, talking about some summer mistakes here right before the football kicks off with Quinshon Judkins and the Cleveland Browns and Najee Harris and the Los Angeles Chargers. But now we're going to talk about the Chicago Bears, a team I'm high on this year and a team that I have been, given a lot of credit to this offseason for what they've done. Now, before we dive into that, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. But want to get you guys excited for the Locked On NFL Top 100. It's going to be released on Wednesday, July 16th at 10 a.m. Eastern on Locked On Sports Today. The NFL Top 100 was voted on by all the Locked On NFL hosts of the Locked On Podcast Network. And trust me, there are some stunners. Don't miss where your favorite players were ranked. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I don't think there's going to be a lot of Tennessee Titans on there, but Louis, you'll probably have a lot of content needed to come out with all the Eagles that show up on that list.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be busy this week for sure.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, as they say, but we'll see if the Bears have a good problem with all the money they just gave to Ryan Poles, gave it an extension out to 2029. That's a 4-year extension for the general manager who traded an early second-round pick for Chase Claypool. It does make you wonder. Now, there are some great moves in there as well. The Bryce Young trade really worked out for the Bears. They got a lot of draft capital. He's made some other great additions to the team as well. Want to give Ryan Poles some credit for some of the good moves that he has made, building out that defense and building out an offensive line that looks pretty solid. So he has made some good moves. Caleb Williams, that kind of will define him, I'd imagine. But even I think Ryan Poles has had some good and some bad, and maybe even the good outweighs the bad. Seems still a little early to be committing to Ryan Poles until 2029 without seeing what exactly happens this season.
No, I completely agree. And I really like what a lot of Ryan Poles has done over the past couple of years. Obviously, the Chase Claypool trade was terrible, right?
Insane.
But
yeah.
I do think he built a really strong support system for Caleb Williams. DJ Moore and Roma Dunze should be more than good enough. Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland at tight end. They got Joe Tooney this year. They have a offensive line that's got pieces, and Ben Johnson's seen as one of the best play callers in the NFL. He gets him as a head coach. But eventually, though, Tyler, results have to matter, right?
Yes.
And so I'm with you, even though in theory, I like a lot of the philosophical things that Poles has attempted to do and has done over the past couple of years to build a contender in Chicago. I even like a lot of the pieces on defense, especially in that secondary. Eventually, though, the proof's got to be in the pudding. They got to turn it into wins, or else what are we doing here? So I do think it's maybe a year too early, but I think Chicago, they clearly believe in what they're building. And again, on paper, it looks really enticing, but it did last year and the last couple of years, at least for me. And again, results at some point have to matter in this league.
Well, I think the one thing that people gave Caleb Williams some slack on last year was the coaching. It was pretty clear he didn't have great coaching. Well, our opinion of Ben Johnson would mean that he does have great coaching now. And I think he does have a good set of weapons. And the offensive line isn't too bad. And Ben, like you said, Caleb Williams might need to be added to the list of, hey, you need to step it up in your second year if you're going to show that you were worthy of the number one pick and not, the third or fourth best quarterback in your class. He's behind Nix right now. He's definitely behind Jaden Daniels, obviously. And Drake May, I think right now they're pretty even. So he could be the fourth best quarterback in his draft class, drafted number one overall. And that's a disappointment no matter what we talk about. Like, to get the fourth best quarterback, and who knows what J.J. McCarthy does. And Michael Penix is like, who knows where Caleb Williams ranks amongst those guys coming out of this year. And he clearly has one of the best circumstances of all of them. But what ultimately might be the test for the Chicago Bears is the amount of depth that they have on their roster. And that is another thing that's on Ryan Poles' plate. And that's something that Lauren Cox talked about on Locked On Bears.
The good teams have better depth. They're more able to overcome the injuries that they do have because the other players they have to step up are better and rise to that occasion, and perhaps are coached better as well, is a big part of that factor. But we'll take a look at just how much the Bears might be missing and how devastating an injury could be at some of these key spots where they don't have enough depth, like the edge rusher position on the defensive line. I think on the interior, they're doing just fine with Javon Dexter and Grady Jarrett and Andrew Billings, and they drafted Shamar Turner in the second round. They still have Zach Pickens as a former third-round pick. They traded for Chris Williams the last preseason. Like, they've got some names and some depth on the interior. But the edge continues to be the biggest hole left on this roster, in my opinion, behind Montez Sweat and Dio Odengbo. They don't really have that true number 3 edge rusher to rotate in there. It's Austin Booker. It's Dominique Robinson. They brought back Daniel Hardy and Jamari Croma, although Hardy's been rotating in at linebacker and not on the defensive line for the entirety of the offseason. So there's some potential playing time available there. They've added a couple undrafted free agents, but there's really not anybody proven with any kind of NFL productivity behind Montez Sweat and Dio Odengbo.
And there's been some conversation over the weekend about a potential Matt Judon pairing with the Chicago Bears. A guy like Jadeveon Clowney, Zadarius Smith still out there as well. Do you think the Bears do need to make another move based on what we're seeing there from Lauren's depth chart?
I think they do have to do something up front, especially on the edge. And there are some guys out there, like you said, Zadarius Smith, Clowney, Judon. Even, I don't think Von Miller has much left in the tank, but as a rotational third or fourth guy on the edge, like, can you get 15 good pass rush snaps out of him throughout the year? Maybe. So I think there are guys out there they need to add. But yeah, the Bears normally are a defense built more front to back, but they're more back to front this year. Like, I think they have a really strong second and third level of the defense. I really like what they have in the secondary. I like their linebacker duo of Edwards and Edmonds. But yeah, they definitely need some help because they're one Montez Sweat injury away from really being in trouble getting to the quarterback. And we all know, like, to be a true Super Bowl contender, if they want to take that next step, you got to have not just 2 pass rushers, but 3 to 4. And right now it's like, do they really even have 2? So that's a thin position. And seeing the depth chart really kind of exposes that.
Yeah, I think it's by far the thinnest position because, I mean, the offensive line has questions, but you have your starters. You have some guys who could be potential starters in the background there. The weapons, obviously, they have enough. You add in Colston Loveland when he's healthy to be out there. And the real question is that edge rush position. So it would make sense for the Bears. But we'll see if Ryan Poles is the guy to make the move. And they really need some success in Chicago this year. I think anything less than a playoff berth would feel like a disappointment for the Windy City. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am your host, Tyler Rowland, the Madman, with my co-host, Louis DiBiase, the Legacy. As I tell you every episode, and just told you a second ago, thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.